How's it going, everyone? Welcome to episode 4 of Rogue Revolution. Check it out! I finally got my first viewer request. Tate in Overwatch asked me to take a look at the Belobetty leader, which I did. So you may be looking at the thumbnail and reading the video title wondering what the heck happened. Well, we'll get to that guy in a bit, but first I'd like to go over this Betty deck list. Think of it as a mini episode before we get to the main part of this episode, and it'll all make sense after I've gone through everything, how we ended up with the Fishman. So, Belobetty is of course a 4-life Rev Army leader with access to red and yellow. She has the ability to pump 3 trigger or Rev Army characters each turn with plus 3000 power at the cost of a Rev Army discard, which lends herself to a very aggressive playstyle. She's gotten a new tool or two with each set to add to her repertoire, and OP13 is no different, bringing with it a much-needed additional searcher that can be buffed by her leader ability. Now that Betty has 2 searcher cards that she can use her leader effect on, we can more reliably get to 3 bodies on the board by turn 3 when going first, or turn 2 when going second. With this in mind, my build leans into the low curve by cutting some of the more awkward mid-game cards a traditional Betty list may run, such as the 5-cost Ivankov. Starting out as an extra 1-drop, we are playing the 1-cost trigger Charlotte Poire. This is the only additional 1-drop I am playing, and while it is uncommon in Betty lists, it does check all the boxes I was looking for. 1, it is capable of being buffed by Betty effect. 2, it can trigger itself out of life without needing to discard a card. Okay, well, technically it does need to discard initially, but you draw a card right afterward, so you keep the number of cards in your hand the same after the effect has resolved. And 3, it does have counter power. Next, at the 2-cost slot, we have the Popper Kuma. He's great for eliminating the small threats your opponent may play, such as Searchers, just so that they can't swing into our small bodies after we've buffed them and swung with them. It'll force them to swing their leader or a more substantial character into our little goobers. There's also the Shrinker Koala, which can put a 5k body in range of the Popper Kuma, and then the PRB Otama. A lot of decks will try to starve Betty as their way to win, and Otama is a great way to keep up the aggression while also drawing a card out of our life, not to mention she's searchable by the new Lilith. At the 3-cost slot, there's the Rusher Inazuma, a great way to get full use out of our leader effect, even if our board only had 2 units at the start of the turn. And there's also the Belobetty that can draw a card if you only have 2 life remaining, and it also triggers to play itself from your life as long as you and your opponent have a total of 5 or less life cards. A lot of decks would play Karasu over this Betty as a way to get a blocker trigger out of life, but with how popular Starving Betty is right now, and how Zoro would completely disregard a singular blocker anyway, I'd rather play the one that draws a card instead of the blocker. Next, there's the 4-cost slot, which is where the majority of our cards reside. We have the standard suite of Red of Army cards, including the Ivankov that cheats out an extra body, the 2k Kuma that plays itself out of life, and the Lindbergh that also plays itself out of life at the cost of a card and pops 3k bodies. Plus, the heart and soul of this strategy, which is Karasu. Most games are won or lost based on the number of Karasu that you can find, especially against Red Blue Ace. The last card is the 6-cost Koala Blocker. I have this as a 2 of to give us just a little bit more oomph in order to close out the game, as she does cheat out an extra body and also draws a card from your life and then one from the top of the deck after doing so. Since this is a mini episode, I have just one game to showcase, but it's more or less what you're going to be looking for in every matchup. So for our showcase game, we are up against the Red-Blue Ace deck, and our opponent did win the die roll, but chose to go first. A little surprising, but we'll see what he has in store for us. Our opening hand looks pretty good though. We have a couple searchers, and even draw into another one. What we're going to be looking for is going to be the Karasu, and we do in fact find it. That's going to be really helpful for us, as it will drop the Ace down to a 5k leader. His turn is just swinging 9. A lot of times this does happen with Ace when they have to go first, and so because we have the Karasu though, and he becomes a 5k leader, our 2k bodies suddenly can start to trade into him, and he has to start giving us cards or take damage. He does take the first one, of course, so he can draw the 2, and then we'll defend out of the next 2 swings. Now, fortunately for us, since Ace only plays 0 power searchers, both the Izu and the Otama are not going to be able to trade into our 2k bodies, and so we do get to keep one. Additionally, we have a Koala for our turn 6 and an Inazuma in hand, so we'll just go ahead and cheat that into play and then buff all of our board, including the Inazuma. Now we can reduce him to a 5k, and after this 8k swing, we'll get another 5, and then a 7 with the Inazuma. He does get to have the rush since the Karasu is an 8k, and our opponent has already taken a damage this turn from the 8k swing. He's countering out with 2ks, which tells us he probably doesn't have a ton of counter in hand, and in fact takes the 7k swing from our Inazuma. From here, he does bounce back our 6k Koala and tries to trade into the not the Inazuma, the Karasu here. We're pretty much willing to give our entire hand to defend this, though, just because he's showing us he doesn't have a lot of counter, and in fact, I'll even go ahead and defend this Inazuma, just because every bit of power is going to matter here. We have a Rev Army card to dump, so we will do so, and we'll just go all in with the Karasu. And even if this doesn't kill him, I mean, we have a 5k, and another 7k after this, so it's very likely that we'll be able to get there, and in fact, the first swing does win. So that was the one game I had to showcase, and as you saw, Betty is quite capable of pushing the opponent to the brink well before they hit their preferred late game, whether it be Ace or Emu. Even against Zoro, if you can manage to go wide enough, since they only clear one body a turn, you can still overwhelm them. You just need to manage to get a few trigger bodies out of life. A lot of versions do play the stage because they would rather trade a card in early dawn to try and consistently find all the Rev Army bodies they need in time. However, for this version of the deck, I don't think that you can afford to, as you're already hurting to keep cards in hand by turn 3, especially if the opponent is not attacking your life. That being said, the aggression comes online earlier more consistently for this deck, and so I do feel the trade-off is okay. Especially since against a deck like Emu, where if they get to 10 Dawn and manage to drop the 5 Elders, you're probably out of there anyway. With that being said, the aggression this deck puts up chews through the opponent's hand super fast, limiting their options and punishing a poor start better than pretty much any other deck in the game. But the deck does have some serious drawbacks. Just like the other Rev Army leader I showcased in the first episode, Koala, this deck is significantly better if you get to go second compared to if you get to go first. The curve just works better, and the extra card makes a world of difference. Additionally, against Ace, if you don't have a Karasu by turn 3, a lot of times that can just be the end of the game right there. This is something the stage would help in finding, but when I played it, I would have trouble keeping cards to play against Emu and having counterpower left to live against Zoro. Lastly, there is a significant difference in power for this deck based on the number of triggers that you have in life, especially against Zoro. Ace and Emu are likely going to starve you, but they do need to attack you eventually to win, and so a lot of times you can steal games as well if you can get a couple of trigger bodies out of your life, provided you live to see your next turn. These are all drawbacks that Betty has had forever, relying on high-rolling the opponent by either winning the roll, hitting triggers, or just drawing a good curve. And so I expect to see her end up as a solid rogue deck that just needs a little bit of luck to take down pretty much any deck, but largely falls short at large events just because eventually you're gonna get a little bit unlucky or your opponent might high roll you. I'll put her here at the same spot as Koala. Very good for locals, but likely cursed to be 6-3 at a major. I did like the hyper aggression of this deck though. I just wished it was a go first deck instead of a go second deck, since every one of the big 3 wants to go second if they win the die roll. If my deck wanted to go first anyway, I wouldn't be so susceptible to a bit of bad luck. So I poured through the leaders of One Piece for the best possible aggressive leader that wants to go first. And after diving through those depths, I surfaced with a new set of teeth. Watch out, viewer, because here comes Arlong. Arlong is a 4-life green and yellow fishman East Blue leader with 1 effect. When he has 2 Dawn attached and attacks, you can play a 4-cost or less trigger body from your hand. For this reason, he can cheat out a 4-cost body ahead of curve when going first, while also getting a big swing in on turn 2. Not to mention, since you're incentivized to put plenty of triggers in the deck to cheat out with leader effect, you're likely to hit 1 or 2 out of life as well. Arlong is also a slash leader, which gives him access to the unique Searcher Perona, which can help bridge some of the archetypes that we're going to want to play. Arlong does need to rely on character and event effects to rest characters, which unfortunately does make him a bit more unreliable at circumventing Marco and Workuri, which does mean that not only will they get their blocks off, but they also do get to draw the cards that they would get on KO. He also has a glass jaw, there's really no other way to put it. Since you do cheat out so many cards from your own hand, and you have a bunch of triggers out of life that just play themselves or rest a 4-cost body, you're going to end up in the late game with basically no cards in hand, and none of your triggers actually stop your opponent from finishing you off. Lastly, if the game isn't over by the time the opponent gets to 10 Dawn, then Arlong has likely lost. Arlong, of course, has the capability to win the game before this point, but you are always playing on the clock with this leader. There is no late game option, you just have to go for it every single time, and if the opponent has it, then you're out of there. Getting into the card by card, we'll start with our searchers. I already mentioned the Perona, but we are also playing the Lilith that I had mentioned in the Belobetty deck list. Neither of these searchers are archetype locked, since one searcher goes for triggers and the other one will look for slash attribute characters. I also have 2 copies of Cammy as a way to search any Fishman. This is mostly just as a way to get to Hody Jones, but there's plenty of other Fishman targets in the deck as well for her to grab. I'm also playing the PRB Otama that I had brought up in the Belobetty deck for much the same reason. A lot of the people that you're going to be facing are going to choose to starve you just because you are an aggressive deck and they do need to make it to their late game to win. And also they just don't want to hit a trigger body out of your life. So Otama is great in those situations. She gives you some extra power, gives you the card out of your life so you can get some extra fuel, and she's also searchable by Lilith and is a 2k. At the 3 Dawn slot is the EBO2 Arlong. He is one of our answers to the annoying 4-drop blockers, preventing them from being rested until the start of our next turn, so when we attack they can't block with them, and then on their turn they won't be able to attack with them either. He also gives us a Dawn on our leader, which allows us to still swing 7 and activate leader effect on 5 Dawn. For the 4 Dawn slot, we also have the Uta, who, much like the 3-drop Arlong, allows us to still use leader effect on the 5 Dawn turn, as well as she does restand 2 Dawn on play, which we can then stick under the leader and then rest the last Dawn to play our card. Additionally, she's great when going first against Emu specifically, since if they do have the Mars to KO her, then we'll be able to play any 5-cost or less character out from our hand, albeit rested. Then there's all the trigger bodies that we can play from hand, the most obvious of which is the Kikunojo. Kikunojo is a fantastic 6k. I mean, I play her in pretty much every yellow deck that I build, just because it does have a trigger to play her out of life, and also heals you 1 when she's KO'd. There's also the 6k Buggy that gives our leader double attack, a cheeky way to take 2 from your opponent if they countered out of your first 7k swing, and the 4-cost Arlong, which can prevent the opponent's leader from attacking the next turn by discarding a card. Seeing a couple of these against Zoro specifically is a game changer, as it does pretty much completely blank their Tashigi turn, and in the late game can save your life and give you an extra turn as well. There's also Hachan. He's mostly just a 2k, but it is searchable by all 3 of the searchers, and he can still play himself from life. I'm also going to include the OP11 Arlong here. He is technically a 7 cost, but once you're at 3 life and your opponent has 5 rested cards in play, he becomes a 4 cost in hand, so then you can play him with your leader effect or just pay 4 Dawn to play him cleanly. Then at the top end of our deck is just 4 Hody Jones. Extremely necessary to see one of these bad boys to close out the game against Emu specifically. He does also help against Ace, as you can rest a Marco and a Whitebeard as you're going for game. For our events, we are playing 4 copies of the Blaze Slice. It's just another way to get around Marcos and Workuris in addition to the EBO2 Arlong, so that you can prevent them from getting the draw when they are KO'd. A lot of times, Ace and Emu both dip to 2 life fairly early, so this can come online prior to the last turn of the game, which is very convenient a lot of the time. And so here's the full deck list here. With that out of the way, let's get into the games. My first matchup here is up against Zoro, and here I'll show you just how explosive the Arlong deck really can be. We're up first, and we open up a searcher, so we just grab the Buggy the Clown card. This is a great way to force our opponent to use some early counter power. We'll just go ahead and drop him here. If he doesn't counter, then we'll happily take 2 life, as it will activate our Kikunojo. He does give the 2 cards though, and he does have a Quina as well, so he'll be able to swing 8 into our Buggy, but we can go ahead and 2-1 out of it, and then he'll be able to hit us. We do hit a trigger, fortunately. Hachan comes down, and so with this we can really start to pressure his life. We can go with a 5 with the Hachan, 7 with the buggy, and then 7 with leader and play our Kikunojo. And Kikunojo is basically going to be on the board for the rest of this game, as he won't be able to remove it without triggering our heal effect from it. And if he heals us, well, he's basically never going to get to the end of the game before we can finish him off. He does play a Searcher with his last Dawn, hoping that he'll be able to use it to find something next turn, but we fortunately do have our spell card to rest it, and then we can go ahead and go 7 again with all 3 of our bodies, and he does take the first one and then also the second one, so he will have to counter out of the last one. I am just holding up the last Dawn, though, for our other counter event, as he could potentially swing 8 3 times if he has the restand event, and we only have 3k worth of counter in hand, so basically, and that's including the 1-cost spell, so I'm just holding on to it just in case he does try to go for game here. And if he swings 7 with Tashigi, we can obviously just counter out with our 3k. He does decide to go for board here, which I'm a little bit surprised about, but I figure he just has like a couple blockers he's going to throw down, and fortunately our Blaze Slice will be able to at least get rid of one of them. And he does throw down a Searcher here, though, and picks up a 2k, so again, he is probably just trying to live. He throws down another body, though, as well, and then just swings 7 into our lead. I happily take the damage, and it is a trigger, at which point he will concede, but we would have had the game anyway if he had dropped down that blocker. In our game 2, we're up against Red Blue Ace, and I do win the die roll, so I decide to go second. I also open 2 Searchers in the opening hand, so I decide not to mulligan it away. What we're looking for here is basically just something to do on turn 2, and then also a way to stop his Marcos, and we do find both. We've got a Kikunojo who is already online because of course Ace does start with 3 life, so if he does remove it, then we'll be able to heal. Additionally, we do have an Arlong here, so in case he drops a Marco, we can freeze the Marco, prevent it from blocking. We do draw into a buggy, though, here, and so we'll just go ahead and drop that and give ourselves double attack to force him to give us 2 cards. One of the benefits of going second is that you get to swing 8 into the Ace, and of course swinging 6 and 7 against Ace on your first attack is basically the same, since his ability turns any card into a 2k, basically. He does give us the 2 cards, which is what I was hoping for. And so on our following turn, we'll just go ahead and swing 8 and swing 8. I could have dropped the Arlong, but he didn't play a Marco, so I just want to hold on to it just in case he eventually plays a Marco, as it is one of our only ways to interact with that card. We do have a Blaze Slice as well, though, but the 4k body doesn't do too much for us, just because we have to put 2 Dawn on it to hit him anyway. On his 7 Dawn turn, a lot of times they're just going to Jozu one of our bodies away, and so I do want to defend this buggy if he swings into it, but I also need to defend my life, and unfortunately I don't have any 2ks in hand, so I have to give him a bunch of cards this turn. But at least we are still at 2 life, so we are going to get another turn after this one. Sometimes Ace can pressure you to the point where basically their 9 Dawn turn is when they're able to go for game. But thanks to our Arlong, we will be able to mitigate the amount of swings that he has to just 2, and we have 2 life, so there's no way that we die. We will at least get to have our Hody Jones turn. We're just hoping he doesn't drop a white beard like he just did. So unfortunately, he does get to cycle through his hand, get a big blocker, and pressure us all the way down to 1. I was kind of hoping that would be a Kikunojo body, but it was not. And so from here, we do just have to go for game. There is no way we're going to be able to live through a Whitebeard plus a Jozu plus a Yamato and the leader swing with only 1 life left and like 4k counter in hand. So we go 6, and we go 6, and we're going to go 8, and we're going to go 8, and hopefully that's just enough. He does get to draw an extra card, though, because he does have the Dawn on the leader, and from here, he does have the counter power, so we'll just have to concede the game. For game 3, we're up against Emu, the other Titan of the format, and they do win the die roll, so they choose to go second. No big surprise, but we're Arlong, so of course we don't mind going first. What we do mind, though, is not having a 4-cost trigger card to play for turn 2. Unfortunately, we don't have one in our hand yet. We did have a Searcher, though, so I kept the hand, and looking with our Searcher, we didn't find anything to play. So hopefully we just top deck that. A 4-cost like a Kikunojo, or the 4-cost Arlong, or even a Buggy, something like that, just so that we can play a card from hand. I am thinking, though, we do at least have an Otama, and we are going to have to play the Otama, because unfortunately our top deck is an Uta. I do really like this Uta, and this is the matchup it's here for, but you know, we already had one in hand, so we really didn't need this second one. Not a big deal, though. We'll just go ahead and swing 5, and then swing 5 with leader, and we'll go ahead and use this Cammy now. We're just digging for a Hody Jones, as a lot of times Hody Jones helps smooth out the last turn of the game, usually our 9 Dawn turn, as a way to rest blockers and Dawn so that we can help to clinch the win. Unfortunately, we don't find one. Our only target is a 2k counter card, but, you know, better than nothing, better than whiffing, so we'll just go ahead and take that happily. And now we do have 3 life at this point, so thankfully we will be able to at the very least play one of these 7-cost Arlongs, and they are resistant to the Mars removal, which is a very nice thing about it. The Mars only pops 5 drops. We also have an Uta to play with it as well. Like I said in the deck intro, basically the Uta restands 2 Dawns, so even on a 5 Dawn turn, we'll end up with 3 after playing her, and so we can stick 2 on the leader, swing 7, and then we'll be able to play the Arlong, and that's what we're going to do right here. They go ahead and just counter out with an event. Not a big deal. As long as we keep eating cards out of their hand, eventually they will run out. And so we are expecting a Mars here, which will be another 2 cards out of their hand. And fortunately, Uta is actually allowed to play Uta from hand, so we just go ahead and do that. And hopefully, we are hoping he goes 6 into it, which he does, and then we can play the Arlong as well. We couldn't play the Arlong initially because it does require your opponent to have 5 rested cards, and until he swung with that Warcury, unfortunately, or not a Warcury, the Searcher guy. Until he swung with that, he didn't have 5 rested. Anyway, we draw into a buggy. We're just going to go ahead and swing out and play the buggy, and there's no more space on our board, so we're just going to swing 6 with our Searcher. Eat another card out of his hand. We have 1 more turn to win this game until the 5 Elders comes down and locks us up, so our opponent is just trying to live. He drops down 2 blockers, hoping that it's enough. Fortunately for us, we do already have a Blaze Slice, and actually he's going to opt to remove one of our bodies instead of going for life. This is actually very fortunate for us because we do have an Otama, and we do top deck into an Arlong, which will keep his other blocker from being able to block as well. And so we've mitigated both blockers. We can use our leader effect to cheat the Otama in for 1, which will give us a total of 2k extra. We'll just swing 9 and then swing 9 and then swing 9, and we'll have a 7k left to go. He only has 1 Dawn active, so he is able to use it for his spell, but this next 9 is enough to win the game. Well, those were the games. Kind of a mixed bag. On the one hand, you truly don't mind going first or second into Emu or Zoro, but on the other hand, you get absolutely whomped by Ace whether you go first or second. I guess in a sense I've succeeded in creating a leader that basically doesn't care about whether he goes first or second because it just is completely matchup dependent rather than turn order dependent. It is very disheartening that he falls completely flat against Ace, at least with Koala and Carrot for this meta. They both had a bad matchup into the top 3, but it didn't feel as miserable as Arlong does into Ace. I mean, no exaggeration when I say that I had a 25% win rate overall against Ace with Arlong. Now, you can tech against the Ace to make it a little bit better, that's true. You could throw in some big bodies to help. You know, Beppo and Law plus the Popper Shanks are both searchable by Perona as their slash cards, but Arlong has no way to cycle these guys out of his hands, so unlike Carrot, if you draw them into the matchups they're no good for, they're just dead in your hand. They're just big old bricks. And so instead of playing a big body, you could look for a removal spell. So for example, in yellow, you have access to Ryga. Oh, right. Yeah, that thing's still banned. What about stacking your life with Arc, just to try to buy 1 more turn? It's a cheap gimmick, and what's worse, Cammy doesn't even search Noah's Ark. It's a Fishman Island card, not a Fishman card, so only Lilith will be able to grab it. At least once it's in play, though, you could then Vander Decken to pop the Whitebeard, and then maybe use Electrical Luna to freeze the rest of the board? Wait a minute, are we cooking here? No, it just makes the deck way less consistent and a bit slower. But it is very funny, so if you want to give it a try, here's a list for you. Notably, it also buys an extra turn against Emu if you just hard play Arc and Electrical Luna, as they'll have a max of 2 attacks on their following turn. Oh, and these cards do absolutely nothing against Zoro, so you're just kind of throwing that matchup a little bit harder. All in all, I do think Arlong is serviceable, but comes up short of what I'd like to be playing in a regional, so I'm going to put him right here with the Rev Army ladies, since your odds of success will vary greatly depending on how many Ace players you run into. Still, if you just want a straightforward aggressive deck that wins or loses by the 9 Dawn turn, Arlong may just be the fishman for you. Well, that's that. Sorry I didn't give Betty a full episode, but hopefully I was still able to give you some ideas on how to use her for OP13. For either of the decks presented here today, were there any cards you feel that I overlooked that could have improved them? What deck are you hoping to see next? Let me know in the comments below, and if you liked what you saw in the video, be sure to drop a subscribe. I'll be looking at a new leader each week. That's all for now though, thanks for watching.